My fiancé hid my late husband's ring, and the truth made me run away that night because he intended to melt it down and wear it as a trophy on his cuffs. For 48 hours, Matthew stood over me while I crawled through rotting garbage on my hands and knees, sobbing and begging for forgiveness, while he held the very ring I was searching for in his pocket. He watched me break. He held me while I hyperventilated and told me that my subconscious had thrown the ring away because I loved him more than my dead husband. He made me question my sanity, my memory, and my own heart, all to manipulate me into selling the home David left me. He did not just want to marry me. He wanted to consume my past and wear my grief as an accessory. I had to drug him with his own wine just to escape the house without him burning it down. I am shaking in a motel room with no plan and no future, wondering how evil can wear such a charming face. How do you ever trust again when the person sleeping next to you gets pleasure from your torture? Tell me, did I go too far by running away? Or did I just narrowly escape a monster? My name is Audrey Vance. I am 34 years old, a freelance graphic designer by trade, and a widow by circumstance. I live in a sprawling colonial revival tucked away in the quiet, leafy suburbs of Westport, Connecticut. It is the kind of neighborhood where the lawns are manicured to the millimeter and the homeowners association watches your garbage bins like hawks. To the outside world, specifically the whispering members of our local community center, I am the tragic beauty who struck gold twice. First, with a substantial inheritance from my late husband, David, and now, with a second chance at love. I sat in the wingback chair in the corner of the living room, a glass of Chardonnay resting on my knee. The house was silent, save for the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. This house was David's pride. He bought it 3 years before the aneurysm took him, paying for it in cash with the bonuses from his investment banking career. It is a big house for one person, too big. It echoes, but it is my fortress, or at least it was. Then there is Matthew Sterling, 38 years old, a pharmaceutical sales representative with a smile that could disarm a bomb squad and a charm that feels practiced, like lines rehearsed in front of a mirror. He moved in 3 months ago. He fills the empty spaces of this house with his cologne, a sharp musk scent that overpowers the smell of old books and cedar that David loved so much. Matthew is the man who saved me. That is what everyone says at the country club. They pat his back and tell him he is a saint for taking on a broken woman. I watched him now, standing by the fireplace, swirling his scotch. He looked perfect. He was wearing a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, exposing forearms that were tanned and fit. He was everything a woman should want. He was alive. He was here. Audrey, darling, Matthew said, his voice smooth, like velvet dragged over gravel. He turned to face me, the firelight dancing in his eyes. You are zoning out again. I blinked, forcing a smile onto my face. It felt tight, like a mask that did not quite fit. I am sorry. Matt? Just tired. The new project for the shelter is draining me. You work too hard for people who do not appreciate it, he said, taking a sip of his drink. He walked over and sat on the ottoman in front of me, placing a hand on my knee. His hand was warm, heavy, possessive. You know you do not have to work, right? We have enough. You have enough. There it was. The we. He used that word a lot lately. When he moved in, he brought 2 suitcases and a mountain of credit card debt that he jokingly called battle scars from his 20s. I had the house, the life insurance money, the stocks. But suddenly, it was we. I like working, I said softly. It keeps my mind busy. Matthew said, a sound of exaggerated patience. He looked around the room, his eyes scanning the crown molding, the heavy velvet drapes, the antique rug. His gaze was critical, like a buyer inspecting a used car for scratches. It is just... He paused, searching for the right words. This house, it is so heavy, is it not? All this dark mahogany, it feels like a museum, a mausoleum. Really, my fingers tightened around the stem of my wine glass. It is a historic home. Matthew, it is supposed to look like this. I know, he said soothingly, squeezing my knee. But does it have to be so? David? The name hung in the air between us. Matthew rarely said David's name without a slight inflection of disdain, as if the mere existence of my late husband was a personal insult to him. He stood up and walked over to the mantelpiece. There, in the center, sat a silver-framed photograph. It was the only one I had refused to pack away when Matthew moved in. It was a black and white shot of David and me in Paris, taken 5 years ago. We were laughing, caught in a candid moment of pure, unadulterated joy. I looked so young in that photo, so light. Matthew picked up the frame. He held it with the tips of his fingers, as if it were contaminated. I just want you to be happy, Audrey, he said, his back to me. Really happy, not living in a shrine to a ghost. It is unhealthy. I read an article about this the other day. It prevents the grieving process from concluding. My inner voice screamed at him to put it down. Put it down. That is my life. That is my memory. But on the outside, I remained frozen. I had learned that challenging Matthew usually led to hours of circular arguments, where I would end up apologizing for being too sensitive or hormonal. I am happy, Matt. I lead. The words tasted like ash. He turned around, placing the photo back on the mantel, but he turned it slightly, just a fraction of an inch, so it faced more toward the wall than the room. A subtle erasure. I was thinking, he continued, his tone brightening as if he had just had a brilliant epiphany. Maybe it is time we look for our own place. Something modern, something open concept, a place with a lot of glass and light, a place where we can build our legacy, not live in the shadow of his. He walked back to me, looming over the chair. He looked down at me with an expression that mimicked concern but felt dangerously like ambition. Think about the equity in this place. Audrey, he whispered, leaning in close. We could sell this, buy a penthouse in the city, and still have plenty left over to invest. We could travel, we could start fresh. No ghosts, just us. I looked at the engagement ring he had given me 3 months ago. It was a modest band, nothing compared to the heirloom diamond David had proposed with, which now hung on a gold chain hidden beneath my sweater. I felt the cold metal of David's ring pressing against my sternum, a secret weight against my skin. Matthew was asking me to sell my sanctuary. He was asking me to liquidate the last physical proof of the life I had before the tragedy. I will think about it, I stammered, looking down at my wine. Good, Matthew said. He leaned down and kissed my forehead. His lips were dry. That is all I ask. You need to stop living in the past. Babe, it makes you look weak. And you are not weak, are you? You have me now. He straightened up and walked toward the kitchen to refill his drink, humming a tune under his breath. I watched him go. The hallway light cast a long shadow behind him that stretched across the Persian rug. swallowing the patterns in darkness. I took a large gulp of wine, letting the alcohol burn the back of my throat. I told myself he was right. I told myself I was being ungrateful. I told myself that a good fiancé makes compromises. But as I glanced back at the mantelpiece, at the photo turned slightly away from me, a cold shiver ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the drafty old house. He did not want to build a future. He wanted to demolish my past. And for the first time, sitting there in the silence, I wondered if I was simply another asset he was planning to acquire. The sound of shattering glass is distinct. It is not like the dull thud of a book dropping or the hollow clatter of silverware. It is sharp, violent, and final. That sound tore through the quiet hum of our Tuesday evening like a gunshot. I was in the kitchen, rinsing spinach for a salad, when I heard it coming from the living room. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was an instinctual reaction, a remnant of the anxiety that had plagued me since David died. I dropped the wet leaves into the sink and ran. When I skidded into the living room, the first thing I saw was Matthew. He was standing by the fireplace, a dust cloth in one hand, his posture rigid. At his feet lay the wreckage. It was the silver frame, the one from Paris, the one he had turned toward the wall just days before. The glass was decimated, glittering shards scattered across the dark hardwood floor like diamonds. The silver frame was bent at an unnatural angle, as if it had been stepped on. Though Matthew was standing a foot away, the black and white photograph of David and me lay exposed, vulnerable, with a jagged scratch running right across David's smiling face. "Oh, God," I whispered, falling to my knees. I reached out, my hands trembling, hovering over the mess. "I am so sorry, Audrey," Matthew said. His voice was steady, too steady. "I was just dusting the mantel. I must have bumped it with my elbow. It just flew off." I looked up at him. His face was composed, his brow furrowed in a performance of regret, but his eyes were dry. There was no panic in them, no frantic apology that usually accompanies breaking something precious in another person's home. Instead, there was a strange stillness, a cold detachment. "It is okay," I said automatically, the words tumbling out before I could process the anger rising in my throat. It was my default setting now. Keep the peace. Do not make a scene. It was an accident. I began to pick up the larger pieces of glass. One sharp edge sliced into the pad of my thumb. I hissed in pain, watching a bead of bright red blood well up. "Careful," Matthew said. He did not move to help me. He just watched. "You know, Audrey, maybe this is a sign." I froze, a shard of glass pinching my skin. "A sign? From the universe," he said, shrugging his broad shoulders. "Or maybe even from David. Maybe he is telling you it is time to let go, that keeping his face displayed in the center of our home is holding us back." My stomach churned. The audacity of the statement left me breathless. He had broken my most cherished possession and was now twisting it into a spiritual directive to erase my past. He did this on purpose. The thought was loud and clear in my mind. It was a terrifying thought. If he did this on purpose, what else was he capable of? But then, the self-doubt crept in, insidious and familiar. "No, Audrey, you are being paranoid. He is trying to help. He loves you. Do not be the crazy, grieving widow. Please just get the broom," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I focused on the photo, carefully lifting it from the debris, wiping the dust from David's face with my sleeve. Later that evening, the tension in the house was thick enough to choke on. We were getting ready for a dinner party at the club with some of Matthew's colleagues. He insisted we go. He said it was important for his networking. I sat at my vanity table, staring at my reflection. I looked pale. The small cut on my thumb throbbed. I reached for the gold chain around my neck, pulling it out from under my silk robe. Attached to it was David's wedding band. It was a simple platinum ring, heavy and cool to the touch. I wore it every day, tucked against my heart. It was my anchor. "Are you wearing that?" Matthew's voice came from the doorway. I jumped, quickly dropping the necklace so the ring fell back against my chest. I turned to see him leaning against the doorframe, looking dapper in his navy suit, but his expression was sour. "Wearing what?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "That thing," he said, gesturing vaguely at my neck. "The necklace. It looks heavy, old. It is just a chain." "Matthew," I said defensively, my hand instinctively coming up to cover it. He walked into the room, the scent of his expensive cologne filling the space. He stood behind me, looking at my reflection in the mirror. He placed his hands on my shoulders, his grip firm, too firm. "It is not just a chain, Audrey. We both know what is hanging on it," he said, his voice dropping to a low, intimate register that made the hair on my arms stand up. "You are walking into a room full of my associates, people who look up to me, and you are wearing a dead man's ring around your neck like an albatross." I felt tears pricking my eyes. "It is comforting to me. It is hidden under my dress. No one will see it. I will see it," he countered, his eyes locking with mine in the glass. "I will know it is there. It creates a barrier between us. Every time I hug you, I feel it pressing into me. It is morbid. Audrey, it is like you are cheating on me with a ghost. Cheating with a ghost." The phrase was so absurd, yet so cruel. He was making me feel dirty for mourning. He was making my grief feel like a betrayal. "I am not ready to take it off," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Matthew Sigurd," a sound of profound disappointment. He removed his hands from my shoulders and stepped back. "Fine," he said, buttoning his jacket. "Do what you want. You always do. Just try not to look so tragic tonight. It reflects poorly on me." He turned and walked out of the bedroom, leaving me alone with the silence. I sat there for a long time, clutching the ring. My thumb stung where the glass had cut me. I looked at the empty space on the wall, where the Paris photo used to be. The house felt different tonight. It felt smaller. The walls seemed to be inching closer together. I stood up and finished dressing. I put on the black cocktail dress Matthew had selected for me. It was tighter than I liked, showing more skin than I was comfortable with. I looked in the mirror and hardly recognized the woman staring back. She looked frightened. She looked managed. I tucked David's ring deep inside the bodice of the dress, letting the cold metal rest against my skin. It was supposed to be a comfort, but for the first time in 3 years, it felt heavy. It felt like a secret I was forced to keep. Downstairs, I heard Matthew whistling as he poured himself a drink. He sounded happy. He sounded like a man who had won a victory. And as I walked down the stairs to join him, I realized with a sinking heart that he had broken the photo, and I had apologized. He had insulted my memory of David, and I was the one feeling guilty. The cracks were starting to show, not just in the picture frames, but in the foundation of my reality. And I was terrified of what would happen when the whole structure finally gave way. The house did not feel like mine anymore. It had been transformed into a stage for Matthew's grand performance. He had insisted on hosting a housewarming party, despite the fact that I had lived here for 6 years and he had only been here for 3 months. He called it a celebration of our new chapter. But as the evening wore on, it felt more like an auction, with my life and my home on display for the highest bidder. 40 or 50 people packed into the living room and spilled out onto the patio. I did not know half of them. They were Matthew's colleagues, his gym buddies, his connections. Strangers were drinking red wine on my cream sofas. Strangers were handling the antique vases David and I had collected in Morocco. I stood by the kitchen island, clutching a glass of Pinot Grigio like a shield, watching Matthew work the room. He was radiant. He had a hand on the small of a colleague's back, laughing at a joke that was not funny. He looked the part of the lord of the manor. Every few minutes, he would catch my eye and wink, a gesture that was supposed to be reassuring but felt conspiratorial. "Audrey, sweetheart, come over here," Matthew called out, his voice booming over the jazz music he had curated. I forced my legs to move. I walked toward him, feeling the heavy gold chain around my neck swing against my skin. The ring hidden beneath my silk blouse felt like a burning coal. I was terrified it would slip out, that it would expose me as the fraud Matthew claimed I was. A woman cheating on her fiancé with a ghost. "This is Gary, from the firm," Matthew said, wrapping a heavy arm around my shoulders. He squeezed me tight, his fingers digging into my flesh, just enough to be uncomfortable. "I was just telling him about the renovations we are planning. We are thinking of knocking down this wall to open up the flow. Right, honey?" I froze. We had never discussed knocking down walls. This was David's favorite room. The separation was intentional. It kept the library quiet. We are still discussing it," I stammered, offering Gary a weak smile. Matthew laughed. A sharp, barking sound. "She is sentimental, but she will come around. Drink up, babe. You look tense." He took my half-empty glass and replaced it with a full one. It was the 3rd time he had done that in an hour. I wanted to protest. I wanted to say that alcohol made me weepy and tired, but the look in his eyes stopped me. It was a warning. Play the part. Be the happy hostess. I took a large sip. The wine was sour, but it numbed the anxiety clawing at my chest. The rest of the night blurred into a kaleidoscope of noise and motion. I remember the laughter getting louder, the faces becoming distorted. I remember Matthew guiding me from group to group, his grip on my waist tightening whenever I tried to step away. I remember him whispering in my ear, his breath hot and smelling of scotch. "Relax, Audrey, you are embarrassing me with that long face. Smile." And then, darkness. I woke up to a silence so profound it hurt my ears. The morning sun was slicing through the gap in the curtains, hitting me directly in the eyes. My head throbbed with a dull, rhythmic pain, and my mouth tasted like cotton and stale grapes. I groaned and rolled over, burying my face in the pillow. The events of the previous night were a hazy mess in my mind. I remembered the music. I remembered Gary. I remembered Matthew pouring wine. Lots of wine. I lay there for a moment, waiting for the nausea to pass. Then, as I did every single morning for the past 1,095 days, my hand drifted up to my neck. It was a reflex, a muscle memory. My fingers sought the reassurance of the cold metal chain, the weight of the platinum band that connected me to David. My fingers brushed against bare skin. My eyes snapped open. I sat up so fast the room spun violently. I clawed at my chest, my collarbone, my throat. Nothing. No, I whispered, the words scraping against my dry throat. No, no, no. I threw the duvet off my legs and scrambled out of bed. I dropped to my knees, frantically feeling the carpet around the bed frame. Maybe the clasp had broken. Maybe it had slipped off while I was sleeping. I patted the floor, my breathing becoming shallow and erratic. I checked under the nightstand. I checked under the bed, pressing my face against the dusty floorboards. It was not there. Panic, cold and sharp, washed over me. It started in my stomach and spread to my fingertips, making them numb. That ring was not just jewelry. It was him. It was the promise. It was the only thing I had left that felt real. I tore the sheets off the mattress, shaking them violently. Pillows flew across the room. I ran to the bathroom, checking the sink, the counter, the shower floor. I emptied the laundry hamper, throwing clothes left and right, searching for the glint of gold or platinum. Matthew, I screamed, my voice cracking. Matthew. I ran out into the hallway, barefoot and wearing only my silk slip. The house was pristine. The mess from the party had been cleaned up. The glasses were gone. The cushions were fluffed. It was as if the invasion had never happened. Matthew was in the kitchen, casually brewing coffee. He looked fresh, rested, wearing a crisp polo shirt and khaki shorts. He turned as I burst into the room, his eyebrows raised in mild surprise. "Good morning, Sleeping Beauty," he said, pouring a steaming cup. "I let you sleep in. You were quite spirited last night. It is gone." I gasped, clutching my throat. "Matthew, it is gone." He set the coffee pot down slowly. "What is gone?" "The necklace. David's ring. It is not on my neck. I cannot find it anywhere." Tears began to stream down my face, hot and fast. I felt like I was hyperventilating. Matthew's expression shifted from confusion to concern. He walked over to me and took my shaking hands in his. Hey, breathe," he said soothingly. "Are you sure? Did you check the nightstand?" "I checked everywhere," I cried, pulling my hands away to wipe my eyes. "I never take it off. I never take it off. It must have fallen off at the party. Oh God, someone must have stepped on it or swept it up." Matthew frowned, looking around the clean kitchen. "I cleaned up this morning. I did not see it, but we will find it. It has to be here." He immediately went into hero mode. He started checking under the kitchen counters, lifting the rugs, moving the chairs. I watched him, feeling a surge of gratitude mixed with shame. I was the mess. I was the one who got drunk and lost the most precious thing in the world. He was the stable one, the fixer. "Think, Audrey," Matthew said from under the dining table. "Do you remember taking it off? Maybe to shower? Or maybe you took it off because it was bothering you?" "No," I insisted. "I would never. You were very intoxicated." "Honey," he said gently, standing up and dusting off his knees. He looked at me with a pity that felt like a slap. "You were stumbling. You kept saying how heavy everything felt, how you wanted to be free." I froze. "I said that? You did?" He nodded solemnly. "You were crying in the bathroom. I had to help you to bed. You were tugging at your neck. Maybe you took it off and put it somewhere safe and forgot." A seed of doubt planted itself in my brain. Had the alcohol loosened my grip on reality so much that I tried to discard David? The thought made me sick. "We have to check the trash," I said, my voice trembling. "If it fell on the floor and you swept it up, I already took the bags out to the bin in the garage. Matthew said, "We have to check," I repeated, running toward the garage door. For the next hour, I lived a nightmare. Matthew and I stood in the garage, surrounded by the stench of stale beer and leftover food. We tore open 4 large black garbage bags. I was on my hands and knees on the concrete floor, sifting through soggy napkins, half-eaten canapé, and broken plastic cups. My hands were covered in filth. The smell was making me gag. I cried silently as I picked through the refuse of strangers, looking for the symbol of my eternal love. Matthew stood slightly behind me. He was wearing rubber gloves, picking through the trash gingerly. "This is hopeless. Audrey," he said, holding up a wine-stained paper plate. "It is not here. Keep looking," I snapped, hysteria rising in my voice. "Please, Matt, please." I saw him sigh. He looked at me, disheveled, dirty, smelling of garbage, crying over a dead man's ring. He shook his head slowly. "You know," he said softly, peeling off his gloves, "maybe this is the universe trying to tell you something again. Just like the picture frame." I stopped digging. My hands were buried in coffee grounds. I looked up at him. "Do not say that," I whispered. "I is just being realistic," he said, his voice hard. "You cling to these things. Audrey, you cling to them so tight you suffocate everything else. Maybe your subconscious finally did what you could not do consciously. Maybe you got rid of it." "No," I sobbed, pulling my hands out of the trash. "I loved him." "Then where is it?" Matthew asked. He spread his hands wide, encompassing the empty garage, the trash, the mess of me. "Where is it, Audrey?" Because a woman who cherishes her husband's ring does not get blackout drunk and lose it in a pile of garbage. He turned and walked back into the house, leaving me alone on the cold concrete floor. I sat there among the trash bags, shivering. I looked at my dirty hands. I felt the phantom weight on my chest where the ring should have been, and for the first time, the doubt that Matthew had planted began to take root. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was broken. Maybe I was so desperate to move on that I had sabotaged myself. But then, a small, quiet voice in the back of my mind, a voice I had been ignoring for months, whispered something else. I never take it off. The clasp was secure. I checked it yesterday. I closed my eyes and tried to replay the night. The memories were fragmented, but I remembered one thing clearly. I remembered Matthew's arm around my neck. I remembered his fingers brushing against my nape when he whispered in my ear, "Relax, Audrey." I opened my eyes. The garage felt suddenly very cold. I stood up, wiping my hands on my slip. I had lost the ring. That was the fact. But as I walked back into the house where Matthew was waiting, a terrifying question began to form in the darkness of my mind. Did I lose it, or was it taken? The silence in the house was no longer peaceful. It was accusatory. For the next 48 hours, I existed in a state of suspended animation, a ghost haunting my own hallways. I retraced my steps until the carpet fibers were worn down. I checked the bathroom sink trap 3 times. I crawled under the guest bed until my knees were bruised and purple. The ring was gone. My neck felt naked. It was a physical sensation, like a phantom limb. Every time I turned my head, I expected to feel the familiar swing of the platinum band, the cool metal tapping against my collarbone. But there was only air. The absence was heavier than the ring ever was. It felt like a brand of shame. I stopped eating. I could not swallow past the lump of guilt in my throat. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. while Matthew moved around me with the quiet efficiency of a hospice nurse. He brought me water. He brought me toast that turned to stone on the plate. He spoke in low, hushed tones, as if a loud noise might shatter the fragile remnants of my sanity. "You need to rest, Audrey," Matthew said, placing a hand on my shoulder. We were in the living room. The sun was setting, casting long, skeletal shadows across the floor. "You are running yourself into the ground over a piece of metal." "It is not just metal," I croaked. My voice sounded foreign, scratchy and weak. It was him. It was the last part of him I had. Matthew sat down on the coffee table in front of me, blocking the view of the fireplace. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped together. He looked at me with deep, furrowed concern. It was the look a parent gives a child who has done something bad but does not understand the consequences. "Is it, though?" he asked softly. I looked up, confusion clouding my vision. "What do you mean?" "Audrey, look at yourself," he said, gesturing to my disheveled hair and my trembling hands. "You are falling apart. You have been holding on to that ring like a lifeline. But maybe it was actually an anchor." He paused, letting the words sink in. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His touch was gentle, but my skin crawled. I told myself it was just my nerves. "We have talked about how heavy the past is for you," he continued, his voice hypnotic. "The mind is a powerful thing, babe. More powerful than you realize. I have seen this before. Sometimes, when a person is ready to move on but feels guilty about it, their subconscious takes over. It does the things the conscious mind is too afraid to do." I stared at him, my heart pounding a slow, irregular rhythm. "Are you saying I threw it away? On purpose?" "Not on purpose," he corrected quickly. "Not maliciously, but maybe deep down, in the part of you that wants to live, the part of you that loves me. You knew it was time. You were drunk. Your inhibitions were down. Maybe you took it off and flushed it, or tossed it into the woods. Maybe you just let it fall." Inner monologue. "No, that is impossible. I loved that ring. I loved David. I would never, but I was drunk. I do not remember getting into bed. I do not remember taking off my dress. If I cannot remember that, what else did I do? Am I that broken? Am I that treacherous?" The doubt was a cold worm burrowing into my brain. I started to question my own history. Had I been happy with David? Or had I romanticized it? Was I secretly desperate to escape the widow role? Matthew made it sound so logical. He made me sound like a patient, and he was the doctor with the diagnosis. "I feel like I am going crazy," I whispered, burying my face in my hands. "You are not crazy," Matthew said firmly. He pulled my hands away from my face and held them tight. "You are just grieving, and you are conflicted. You are trying to build a life with me while living in a mausoleum dedicated to another man. It is too much for anyone. No wonder you snapped." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the sprawling lawn that David used to mow every Saturday. "This house," he said, his back to me, "it is the source of all of this. Everywhere you look, you see him. You cannot heal here, Audrey. And now, losing the ring. It is the final straw. The universe is screaming at us." He turned around. The lighting was dim, casting his face in shadow, but I could feel the intensity of his gaze. "I called the realtor," he said. My head snapped up. "What?" "Just to talk," he said, raising his hands defensively. Her name is Sarah. She is the best in the state. She says the market is peaking right now. We could get well over asking price. We could be out of here in 30 days. 30 days? I repeated. The thought of packing up David's life in 30 days made my chest tighten. Think about it, Matthew urged, walking back to me. He knelt on the floor, bringing his face level with mine. No more ghosts. No more constant reminders of what you lost. We could buy that condo downtown, the one with the view of the river, clean lines, new memories, a place that is just ours. He squeezed my hands. I cannot watch you do this to yourself anymore. Audrey, I cannot watch you destroy yourself with guilt over a piece of jewelry. Let me help you. Let me fix this. I looked into his eyes. They seemed so clear, so certain. I felt small and fragile, like a leaf caught in a storm. I had lost the ring. I had failed David. I had proven that I was incapable of guarding his memory. Maybe Matthew was right. Maybe I did not deserve to live here anymore. Maybe I was toxic to this house. I do not know, I said, a tear sliding down my cheek. Trust me, Matthew whispered. I am the only one who is here. I am the only one who is real. David is gone. Audrey. And the ring is gone. It is time to stop fighting it. He was right. I was tired of fighting. I was tired of the guilt. I was tired of the constant, aching void. I wanted to be numb. I wanted someone else to drive the car because I had clearly crashed it. Okay, I breathed. The word was barely audible. Okay, Matthew asked, a spark of triumph flaring in his eyes. Call her, I said, looking down at my empty hands. Call the realtor. Sell the house. Matthew exhaled, a long sound of relief. He leaned forward and kissed me hard on the mouth. It felt less like a kiss of affection and more like a seal on a contract. You made the right choice. Babe, he said, standing up briskly. The concern vanished from his face, replaced by a surge of energy. I will call her right now. We will get the paperwork started tomorrow. You will see. This is going to be the best thing that ever happened to us. He walked out of the room, pulling his phone from his pocket. I heard him dialing, his voice bright and commanding as he greeted the person on the other end. I remained on the sofa, surrounded by the gathering dark. I pulled my knees to my chest. I felt entirely alone. I had surrendered. I had agreed to erase the last physical evidence of my past life. Inner monologue. I am sorry, David. I am so sorry. I do not know what I am doing anymore. I feel like I am drowning, and he is the only one with a hand reached out. But why does his hand feel so cold? I looked at the spot on the rug where I had searched for hours. The house was silent again, but the accusation was gone. Now, it just felt empty, like me. 2 weeks after the ring disappeared, Matthew took me to dinner at the Gilded Lily, the most expensive French restaurant in the city. The air inside smelled of truffle oil and old money. A string quartet played softly in the corner, providing a soundtrack that felt too elegant for the turmoil churning in my stomach. I wore a dress Matthew had bought for me. It was emerald green silk, low cut, and backless. He told me it made me look like a movie star. But as I sat across from him, shivering slightly in the aggressive air conditioning, I felt more like a prop, a doll dressed up for play. Matthew ordered for both of us without asking what I wanted. He ordered the most expensive champagne on the list. He was vibrating with energy, his knee bouncing under the table, his eyes bright and manic. To new beginnings, he said, raising his flute. To leaving the darkness behind, I raised my glass, my hand trembling slightly, to new beginnings. I echoed. The champagne tasted metallic. We were halfway through the main course when Matthew suddenly pushed his chair back and stood up. The restaurant went quiet. The violinist paused his bow mid-stroke. My heart hammered against my ribs. I hated public displays. Matthew knew I hated public displays. He walked around the table and dropped to one knee beside me. "Audrey," he said, his voice projecting just enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "You have been through hell. I know that, but I want to be the one who walks you back into the light. I want to be your protector, your partner, your future." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a velvet box. He snapped it open. Inside sat a diamond so large it looked comical. It was a princess cut, surrounded by a halo of smaller diamonds. Set on a thick platinum band, it sparkled violently under the crystal chandelier. It was cold. It was aggressive. It was the complete opposite of the vintage solitaire David had given me, the one that had been warm and subtle. "Audrey Vance, will you marry me?" The room erupted into polite applause. People were craning their necks, smiling, waiting for the happy ending. I looked at Matthew. His smile was dazzling, but his eyes were hard, demanding compliance. "Yes," I whispered. He slid the ring onto my finger. It was heavy. It felt like a shackle. He stood up, kissed me theatrically, and sat back down as the applause died away. I looked down at my hand. The diamond caught the light and threw it back in sharp, blinding prisms. It felt alien on my skin. Then, my phone buzzed on the white tablecloth. I usually ignored my phone during dinner, especially with Matthew, but the screen lit up with a notification from my bank. A fraud alert. I frowned and picked it up. Matthew was busy signaling the waiter for more champagne. I unlocked the screen and read the message. "Transaction alert, $25,000, authorized at Tiffany & Company." My blood ran cold. $25,000. That was the exact amount in my personal emergency savings account. The account David had set up for me. The rainy day fund I had promised never to touch unless it was a matter of life or death. I looked up at Matthew. He was beaming at the waiter. "Matthew," I said, my voice shaking, "did you use my card?" He turned back to me, his expression unbothered. "What?" "My debit card. The one in the safe. Did you use it to buy this ring?" He took a sip of champagne and shrugged. "Well, of course. My cards are maxed out from the renovations we are planning for the new condo. I figured, since we are getting married, what is mine is yours, and what is yours is ours. It is an investment in us. Babe, an investment." He had drained my safety net to buy a ring I did not choose, to stage a proposal I did not ask for. "You stole from me," I whispered. He laughed. A low, dismissive sound. "Do not be dramatic. Audrey, I did not steal. I moved assets. Besides, once we sell the house, you will have 10 times that amount in the joint account. You are focusing on the money when you should be focusing on the gesture. Do you have any idea how ungrateful you sound right now?" Ungrateful. The word struck me like a slap. He was twisting it again. If I complained, I was cheap. I was unromantic. I was a nag. He reached into his briefcase, which he had strangely brought into the restaurant. He pulled out a thick stack of papers and placed them on the table, right next to the empty oyster shells. "Speaking of the house," he said, his tone shifting from romantic to businesslike in a split second. "Sarah sent the final listing agreement over, We need to sign this tonight so she can list it on the multiple listing service by Monday morning. The market is hot. Audrey, we cannot wait. I looked at the documents. Real estate listing agreement, sale of property. The address of my home, David's home, was printed in bold black letters at the top. Matthew uncapped a fountain pen and held it out to me. Sign it. Babe, let us make this official. The ring, the house, the wedding. It is all happening. I looked at the pen. Then I looked at the ring on my finger. The heavy, $25,000 weight that I had paid for without my consent. I felt a scream building in my chest, but it died in my throat. I was trapped. If I made a scene now, in front of all these people, I would be the crazy woman. If I refused to sign, I was rejecting his love, his proposal, and his investment. He had cornered me. He had used my own money to buy the handcuffs, and now he was asking me to lock them. Audrey, he said, his voice dropping an octave, a warning tone. Do not ruin this night. Do not let the ghosts win. I took the pen. My fingers felt numb. I looked at the signature line. Seller, Audrey Vance. I thought about the library David built. I thought about the rose garden I had planted the spring before he died. I thought about the ghost of the ring I had lost. Matthew watched me, his eyes predatory. He was not looking at my face. He was looking at the pen nib hovering over the paper. I pressed the pen to the paper. The ink bled slightly into the fiber. I, Audrey Vance, signed my name. With each loop of the letters, I felt something inside me fracture. It was not a break. It was a quiet disintegration. I was selling my sanctuary. I was erasing my history. Good girl, Matthew whispered as I finished the final stroke. He snatched the papers away before the ink was even dry, sliding them back into his briefcase with a sharp click of the lock. He reached across the table and patted my cheek. You see, that was not so hard. Now we can finally start living. I looked down at the $25,000 rock on my finger. It did not look like a promise anymore. It looked like a price tag. I had just been purchased, and I had paid for it myself. I picked up my champagne glass and downed it in one gulp, praying for the numbness to return. But it did not. All I could feel was the cold, hard realization that I had just made a terrible mistake, and there was no turning back. The morning after I signed the papers, Matthew left the house with a spring in his step that bordered on a skip. He was wearing his best navy suit, the one he saved for closing big pharmaceutical deals. He told me he was meeting Sarah, the realtor, to hand over the signed contract and get the for sale sign planted in the front lawn. He whistled as he walked down the driveway, swinging his briefcase. Inside that leather case lay the deed to my past, signed away in ink that was barely dry. I stood at the bay window, watching his car disappear around the bend of the street. The house was silent, but it was a different kind of silence now. It felt terminal, like a patient who had been taken off life support and was just waiting for the heart to stop beating. I wandered into the kitchen, aimless. I made a pot of coffee I did not intend to drink. I wiped a counter that was already clean. I was a ghost in my own life, haunting a house I no longer owned. Then, my phone rang. The harsh trill shattered the stillness. I stared at the screen. The caller ID read, Leticia Sterling. My stomach dropped. Matthew's mother. Leticia was a woman carved from granite and scripture. She was 65 years old, a devout Catholic who attended Mass daily and believed that suffering was the only path to salvation. We had never been close. She tolerated me, viewing me as a damaged vessel that her golden son had graciously decided to patch up. She rarely called me directly. Usually, she communicated through Matthew, passing along judgments disguised as prayers. I picked up the phone, my hand trembling. "Hello? Letitia?" "Audrey." Her voice was tight, strained. There was none of the usual polite condescension. "Is Matthew there?" "No. He just left to meet with the realtor. He is... I know what he is doing," she interrupted, her tone sharp, then a pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end, heavy and ragged. "I need to see you. Now. Oh, I am not really up for company. Letitia, I am not feeling very well. I am not coming to the house." She snapped. "I cannot step foot in that house right now. Meet me at the Daily Grind on Main Street. 20 minutes. Come alone. Do not tell Matthew." The line went dead before I could answer. I stared at the phone. "Do not tell Matthew." The command hung in the air, ominous and heavy. The coffee shop was bustling with the mid-morning rush. The air smelled of roasted beans and burnt sugar. I found Letitia sitting at a small table in the back corner, far away from the windows. She was wearing a gray wool coat buttoned all the way to her chin, despite the heating being on full blast. Her hands were clasped around a cup of herbal tea, her knuckles white. She looked older than I remembered. The lines around her mouth were etched deep, and her eyes, usually so piercing and critical, looked red-rimmed and weary. I sat down opposite her. "Letitia, is everything okay? Is it your health?" She looked up at me. For a moment, I saw something in her expression that I had never seen before. It was not judgment. It was pity. A raw, terrified pity that made my blood run cold. "He came to see me last night," she said, her voice low. "After your dinner, after you signed the papers." "Oh," I said, trying to force a smile. "He was probably excited to tell you the news. We are finally moving forward." "Moving forward." She repeated the words as if they tasted like vinegar. She shook her head slowly. "He was drunk. Audrey. He was celebrating. He was boasting. He had a little too much champagne." I defended him automatically. "He is just happy that we are building a future." Letitia reached into her handbag. It was a large, structured leather bag that she carried everywhere. Her movements were slow, deliberate. She pulled out a white linen handkerchief. It was folded into a small square. She placed it on the table between us. My eyes fixed on the white fabric. It sat there like a surrender flag. "My son," Letitia began, her voice trembling, "has many faults. I spoiled him. I know that. I covered for him when he was a boy. I paid off his debts when he was a young man. I prayed that a good woman would straighten him out." She looked me dead in the eye. "But there are sins that even a mother cannot cover, sins that mock the dead and defy God." She pushed the handkerchief toward me. "Open it." My heart began to hammer against my ribs. A frantic, bird-like rhythm. I reached out. My fingers felt numb as I touched the cool linen. I unfolded one corner, then another. There, nestled in the center of the white cloth, lay a platinum ring. The world stopped. The noise of the coffee shop, the grinding of the espresso machine, the chatter of the students, the clinking of ceramic, fell away into a vacuum. It was David's ring, the simple, heavy band with the small scratch on the inside from when he fixed the deck. The ring that hung on the chain I never took off. The ring Matthew told me I had lost in a drunken blackout. I stared at it. I could not breathe. My brain refused to process the image. "How?" I whispered. The word was barely a sound. I lost this. I lost it in the trash. We looked everywhere. You did not lose it, Letitia said. Her voice was hard now, fueled by a righteous anger. Matthew took it. I looked up at her, my vision blurring. What? He came to my house last night, she said, spitting the words out. He was laughing. He pulled this out of his pocket like a trophy. He told me how he unclasped it from your neck while you were passed out after his party. He told me how you panicked, how you cried, how he made you dig through garbage like a dog. I felt a wave of nausea roll over me. I gripped the edge of the table to keep from falling off the chair. Inner monologue. He watched me. He watched me on my hands and knees in the filth. He watched me cry. He held me while I sobbed about being a failure. And the whole time, it was in his pocket. He did not just lie. He orchestrated my torture. Why? I choked out. Why would he do that? Letitia closed her eyes for a moment, as if in pain. He showed it to me because he wanted to ask for a favor. He knows a jeweler in the city, a friend of the family. He wanted me to take it there for him. She opened her eyes. They were wet. He wanted to melt it down. Audrey. He wanted to melt David's wedding ring and have it turned into a pair of cufflinks. I gasped. The air left my lungs in a sharp, agonizing rush. Cufflinks? For the wedding? Letitia whispered. He said he wanted to wear them on your wedding day. He said it would be the ultimate victory. He used the word conquered. He said he had finally conquered the ghost. I put a hand over my mouth to stop the scream that was clawing its way up my throat. The cruelty was so specific, so intricate. It was not just greed. It was hate. It was a desire to desecrate the only thing I had left of the man who truly loved me. I told him to get out, Letitia said, her hands shaking as she gripped her teacup. I told him he was sick. He laughed at me. He left the ring on the table, said he would pick it up later when I calmed down. He thinks I am just a foolish old woman who will do what she is told. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Run, she hissed. Do not marry him. Do not sell your house. He does not love you. Child, he wants to possess you, and he hates David because David was a good man. And my son is something else entirely. I looked down at the ring on the linen cloth. I reached out and picked it up. The metal was cold against my palm, but it felt electric. It felt like David was holding my hand, pulling me back from the edge of a cliff. He made me think I was crazy. I whispered. He made me think I hated David. That is what he does. Letitia said, he breaks things so he can be the one to fix them. But he does not fix them. Audrey, he owns the pieces. I closed my fist around the ring. The sharp edges of the princess-cut diamond Matthew had forced onto my finger dug into my skin, contrasting with the smooth, worn surface of David's band. The $25,000 lie versus the priceless truth. Thank you, I said. My voice was steady now. The tears had stopped. The sorrow was evaporating, replaced by a cold, burning clarity. Go, Letitia said, pulling her hand back. She looked away, staring at the wall. Do not tell him I gave it to you. Just go, and do not ever let him near you again. I stood up. I felt lightheaded, but my legs were strong. I put the handkerchief and the ring into my pocket. I will not let him near me, I promised. I walked out of the coffee shop and into the bright, blinding sunshine. The world looked different. The trees were sharper. The noise of the traffic was louder. I was no longer the weeping widow. I was no longer the confused. A fragile woman who needed saving. I got into my car and sat behind the wheel. I looked at the house listing contract in the passenger seat. The copy I had kept. I picked it up and ripped it in half. Then I ripped it again. Matthew was at the realtor's office right now, selling my life. He was probably laughing, thinking about his cufflinks, thinking about how he had won. I started the engine. The engine roared to life. A good old sound. Inner monologue. You wanted to erase David, Matthew. You wanted to melt him down. You wanted to turn my grief into your accessory. You made a mistake. You thought you were breaking a weak woman. You forgot that I was loved by a good man, and that love does not make you weak. It makes you dangerous when someone tries to destroy it. I shifted the car into drive. I was going home, not to pack, but to prepare. The drive back to the house was a blur of adrenaline and cold calculation. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The tears were gone. In their place was a terrifying calm, a frozen lake of rage. When I pulled into the driveway, Matthew's car was not there yet. Good. I had time. I ran inside, not bothering to take off my shoes. I went straight to the library, the room Matthew hated most. I opened the small safe hidden behind the rows of art history books. My passport, the deed to the house, my birth certificate. I shoved them all into my tote bag. Then I went upstairs to the bedroom. I pulled a small suitcase from the closet and began to throw clothes in. Not everything, just the essentials, just enough to disappear. I heard the rumble of an engine in the driveway. My heart stopped, then restarted at double speed. He was early. I zipped the suitcase and shoved it deep into the back of the closet, behind my winter coats. I kicked my tote bag under the bed. I needed to act normal. I needed to be the Audrey he created. Docile, grateful, oblivious. I smoothed my hair and walked down the stairs just as the front door opened. Matthew walked in, whistling. He looked triumphant. He tossed his keys into the bowl on the entry table. "Honey, I am home," he called out, his voice booming with mock domesticity. "And I have great news. Sarah thinks we can list it for $50,000 over the estimate. We are going to be rich." "Babe." He saw me standing at the bottom of the stairs. He stopped, his smile faltering slightly. "Audrey, you look pale. Are you okay?" I forced the corners of my mouth up. "I am fine. Just a headache." He walked over and wrapped his arms around me. I stiffened. His embrace, once my shelter, now felt like the coils of a snake. I could smell the stale coffee on his breath, mixed with the mint he used to mask it. "Did you take something for it?" he asked, rubbing my back. "Not yet." "Well, go lie down. I will make us some lunch. We have to celebrate. The sign goes up tomorrow." He released me and headed for the kitchen. I watched his back. The arrogance in his stride made my blood boil. "Matthew," I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried through the hallway. He stopped and turned around, a carton of eggs in his hand. "Yeah, I am not selling the house." The silence that followed was absolute. The grandfather clock ticked. A bird chirped outside. Matthew stared at me. A slow smile spread across his face, but it did not reach his eyes. "What did you say?" "I called Sarah. I lead. I told her to hold off. I am not ready." He put the eggs down on the counter, carefully, deliberately. Then he walked back toward me, his movements slow and predatory. "Audrey, we talked about this. You signed the papers. We had a deal. I changed my mind," I said, crossing my arms over my chest. I could feel the outline of David's ring in my pocket, pressing against my thigh. "It is my house, My name is on the deed. I have the right to change my mind. It is our future, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. You are just having cold feet. You are letting the ghosts spook you again. This is exactly why we need to leave. It is not about ghosts, Matthew. It is about respect. He stopped 3 feet away from me. The mask of the loving fiancé dropped completely. His face twisted into a sneer of pure contempt. Respect? He laughed. A harsh, barking sound. You want to talk about respect? I have spent 6 months babying you. I have spent 6 months living in this museum, walking on eggshells around your precious memories. I have tried to save you from your own pathetic wallowing. By stealing from me? I asked. His eyes narrowed. What? The ring, I said. I pulled the platinum band from my pocket and held it up. David's ring. The one I lost in the trash. The one you watched me cry over. The one you were going to turn into cufflinks. Matthew's face went white, then red. He looked at the ring, then at me. Where did you get that? He hissed. Your mother gave it to me, I said, my voice steady. She has a conscience. Matthew, unlike you. He lunged at me. I stepped back, but he was fast. He grabbed my wrist, his fingers digging into my skin like steel claws. Give it to me, he snarled. Let go, I screamed, twisting my arm. You ungrateful little bitch. He spat, his face inches from mine. I did that for you. I did it to free you. You are obsessed with a corpse. You are sick. I am not the sick one, I yelled back. You stole it. You gaslit me. You made me think I was crazy so you could get your hands on this house and my money. It is my money now, he roared, shaking me. We are engaged. You belong to me. This house belongs to me. I will never belong to you, I said, looking straight into his wild eyes. And neither will this house. The wedding is off. Get out. He laughed. It was a terrifying sound. Get out? You think you can just kick me out? After everything I have done? After I fixed you? He shoved me backward. I stumbled and hit the wall. The breath knocked out of me. You are nothing without me. Audrey, he sneered, advancing on me. You are just a sad, lonely widow with too much money and no brain. Who else would want you? Who else would put up with your crying and your shrines? No one. David loved me, I gasped, clutching the ring in my fist. David is dead, Matthew screamed. He is rotting in the ground, and you are going to rot here too if you do not listen to me. He reached for my hand again, trying to pry my fingers open to get the ring. I kicked him in the shin, hard. He grunted but did not let go. You want to keep it so bad? He yelled, twisting my wrist until I cried out in pain. Fine, keep your dead husband's trash, but you are selling this house. You signed the contract. Sarah has it. It is done. I ripped it up, I said through gritted teeth. I ripped up my copy, and I will call her and tell her everything. I will tell everyone. Matthew froze. His grip on my wrist tightened until I thought the bone would snap. He looked at me with a cold, calculating hatred. You will not tell anyone anything, he said quietly. He let go of my wrist and turned toward the front door. He locked the deadbolt, then he engaged the chain. He took the key out of the lock and put it in his pocket. What are you doing? I asked, panic starting to rise in my chest. He turned back to me, smiling. It was the smile he wore when he was closing a deal. We are going to stay right here, he said calmly. Just the two of us. Until you calm down. Until you realize that I am doing this for your own good. You are hysterical. Audrey, you are not thinking clearly. You need a timeout. He walked toward me, forcing me to back up the stairs. You are going to go to our room, he said. You are going to sit there and think about how ungrateful you are being. And tomorrow, when Sarah comes to put up the sign, you are going to smile and sign whatever she needs you to sign. Or else what? I challenged. Though my voice shook, he stopped on the bottom step and looked up at me. His eyes were void of any humanity. Or else I will burn this house down with both of us in it, he whispered. If I cannot have the fresh start, no one will. I turned and ran up the stairs. I heard his heavy footsteps following me, slow and deliberate. I ran into the bedroom and slammed the door, locking it just as the handle turned. Opened the door. Audrey, he said from the other side. His voice was calm, almost bored. There is nowhere to go. I backed away from the door, clutching David's ring to my chest. He was right. The windows were too high to jump. My phone was downstairs in my purse. I was trapped in the house I refused to sell, with a man who wanted to destroy it. But he was wrong about one thing. I was not the weak woman he met 6 months ago. I looked around the room, my eyes landing on the bottle of sleeping pills on the nightstand, the ones he had encouraged me to take when I was too emotional. A plan began to form, a desperate, dangerous plan. Inner monologue. You locked the door, Matthew, but you locked yourself in here with me, and you have no idea what a woman protecting her home is capable of. The doorknob rattled again. It was a sharp, metallic sound that echoed in the silence of the bedroom. I stood in the center of the room, my chest heaving, staring at the white painted wood that separated me from the man who had promised to protect me. Audrey, open the door, Matthew said from the hallway. His voice had shifted again. The rage was gone, replaced by that sickeningly sweet, patronizing tone he used when he wanted something. You are being hysterical. You know I hate it when you get like this. I just want to talk. I just want us to be a family. I looked at the bottle of sleeping pills in my hand. Temazepam, 30 milligrams per capsule, prescribed by a doctor Matthew had recommended because, according to him, my grief was making me an insomnia-ridden mess. I did not answer him. I walked silently to the bathroom attached to the master suite. I turned on the faucet to mask the sound. I emptied 4 of the blue and white capsules onto a tissue. I used the bottom of a heavy glass perfume bottle to crush them into a fine, white powder. My hands were steady. A cold, clinical detachment had taken over my body. This was not fear. This was survival. I swept the powder into the pocket of my cardigan. I turned off the water. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red, my hair messy. I looked exactly like the broken woman he thought I was. Perfect. I walked back to the bedroom door. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the lavender sachets I used to keep the room fresh, a scent that now smelled like a prison cell. I unlocked the door. Matthew was leaning against the wall, checking his watch. When the door opened, he straightened up, a look of smug satisfaction spreading across his face. He thought he had won. He thought his threat to burn the house down had broken my spirit. I am sorry, I whispered, looking at the floor. I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, letting my shoulders slump. You were right. I was panicked. I do not know what came over me. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me. I forced myself not to recoil. I let him pull me into his chest. I could hear his heart beating. Slow, steady, unbothered. Shh. It is okay, he cooed, stroking my hair. I forgive you. We are under a lot of stress. The wedding, the house sale, the grief. It is natural to crack, but that is why I am here. To catch you. He pulled back and lifted my chin with his finger. Let us go downstairs. He said, let us have a drink. We will toast to the sale. We will toast to fresh starts. And then we will never speak of this again. I nodded, weaky. Okay, a drink sounds good. We walked downstairs. He kept his hand firmly on the small of my back, guiding me, steering me. It was a possessive touch, a reminder that I was his property. In the kitchen, the tension was thick. The air felt heavy, charged with the impending storm. Matthew sat on one of the bar stools at the island, loosening his tie. He looked like a king surveying his kingdom. My kitchen, my home, which he believed he had successfully conquered. You sit, babe, he said, gesturing to the stool next to him. I will pour. No, I said quickly. I moved toward the wine rack. Let me do it. I want to show you I am calm. I want to serve you. He smiled. It was a greasy, self-satisfied smile that made my stomach turn. That is my girl. I will take a glass of the Cabernet, the good stuff. I grabbed the bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon and 2 large glasses. I turned my back to him, facing the counter. I could hear him humming a tune, tapping his fingers on the granite. I poured the wine. The dark red liquid swirled in the crystal. With a sleight of hand I did not know I possessed, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the tissue. I tipped the white powder into his glass. I swirled it gently. The powder dissolved instantly into the deep red vintage. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my hands moved with the precision of a surgeon. I turned around, a glass in each hand. I walked over to him and placed the drugged glass in front of him. To us, I said softly. He picked up the glass. He looked at the wine, then at me. For a second, a flicker of suspicion crossed his eyes. My breath caught in my throat. You are sure you are okay? He asked. You seem quiet. I am just tired. Matthew, I said, raising my own glass. And I realized you were right. I cannot keep living in the past. I need to trust you. He relaxed. His ego was his blind spot. He wanted to believe he had tamed me so badly that he ignored the warning signs. To us, he said, to the future. He tipped the glass back and took a long, deep swallow. He drained half the glass in one go. I took a tiny sip of my own wine, watching him over the rim. He set the glass down. Good year, he muttered. For the next 20 minutes, I sat there and listened to him talk. He talked about the condo we would buy. He talked about the honeymoon in Bora Bora. He talked about how he would invest the money from the house sale into his friend's startup. He spent the money I had inherited from a dead man as if he had earned it with his own sweat. Slowly, his words began to slur. He blinked, shaking his head as if to clear a fog. He rubbed his eyes. Wow, he mumbled. That wine hit me hard. You have had a long day, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. Yeah, he said. His eyelids were drooping. He leaned his elbows on the counter, his head heavy. I think I need to lie down. He tried to stand up, but his legs gave way. He stumbled, knocking the bar stool over with a loud crash. He caught himself on the edge of the island, swaying. Audrey? He slurred, looking at me with confusion. What is happening? I stood up. I did not rush to help him. I stood there, tall and still. You are tired. Matthew, I said. You should sleep. He looked at me, and realization slowly dawned in his glazing eyes. He tried to lunge for me, but his body would not obey. He collapsed onto the kitchen floor, his head hitting the tile with a dull thud. He groaned, trying to push himself up, but his arms were like rubber. His breathing became heavy, rhythmic. Within a minute, he was out. I stood over him. He looked pathetic. The monster who had terrorized me, who had stolen from me, who had threatened to burn my house down, was now just a lump of man passed out on my floor. I knelt beside him. I was not afraid anymore. I reached into his pocket and fished out his keys. I found the house key he had taken. I put it in my pocket. Then, I looked at my left hand. The princess-cut diamond glared at me under the kitchen lights. The $25,000 lie. I grabbed his limp hand. I pulled the heavy, gaudy ring off my finger. It scraped against my knuckle, leaving a red mark. I placed it in his palm and closed his fingers around it. You wanted it so bad. I whispered, you paid for it with my money. You can keep it. I stood up. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the linen handkerchief. I took out David's plain platinum band. I slid it onto my finger. It fit perfectly. It felt warm. It felt right. I walked to the hallway and grabbed my purse and the tote bag from under the bed where I had hidden it earlier. I walked to the front door. I looked back one last time. Matthew was snoring softly on the floor. He would wake up in 8 or 10 hours with a headache and an empty house. He would wake up to find that the weak, pliable widow he thought he owned had vanished. I unlocked the front door. The night air rushed in, cool and crisp. It smelled of rain and wet earth. It smelled of freedom. I stepped out onto the porch and closed the door behind me. I did not lock it. I did not care if he came after me. By the time he woke up, I would be 3 states away. I walked to my car, the gravel crunching under my boots. I got in, threw my bag on the passenger seat, and started the engine. I did not look back at the house. I did not look back at the life I was leaving behind. I drove down the driveway, past the spot where the realtor's sign was supposed to go tomorrow. I was running, yes, but for the first time in a long time, I was not running away from something. I was running toward myself. The highway was a ribbon of darkness stretching out before me, illuminated only by the twin beams of my headlights. The world outside the car was a blur of shadows and silence, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the tires against the asphalt. I had been driving for 4 hours. My hands were starting to cramp from gripping the steering wheel, but I did not stop. I could not stop. Every mile I put between myself and that house in Westport felt like a layer of skin being peeled away, exposing something raw but alive underneath. My phone, which I had tossed onto the passenger seat, had been buzzing incessantly for the first hour. Matthew must have woken up early, or perhaps the drugs had not kept him down as long as I hoped. Or maybe it was just notifications, emails from the realtor, reminders about wedding cake tastings, the digital debris of a life I had just detonated. Somewhere near the Pennsylvania border, I pulled into a rest stop. It was desolate, bathed in the sickly yellow glow of sodium lights. I grabbed the phone. 23 missed calls, 14 text messages. I did not read them. I did not want his voice in my head. I rolled down the window. The night air was cold. I looked at the device in my hand. It was a tracking beacon. It was his leash. I stepped out of the car and walked to the edge of the parking lot, where a dense thicket of trees began. I reared back and threw the phone as hard as I could. It disappeared into the darkness, landing with a soft thud somewhere in the underbrush. Silence. I got back into the car and drove. As the adrenaline began to fade, a new sensation washed over me. It was not relief. It was not joy. It was a profound, hollowing exhaustion. I felt like a building that had been controlled demolished, collapsing inward into a pile of dust. I pulled off the highway at a cheap motel just outside of Harrisburg. The neon sign buzzed and flickered. Vacancy. The room smelled of stale cigarette smoke and industrial cleaner. I locked the door, engaged the chain, and pushed a chair under the handle. Old habits die hard. I sat on the edge of the lumpy mattress. I looked at my hands. They were trembling. On my left ring finger, David's platinum band gleamed dully. It was back where it belonged, but the finger itself felt strange, lighter, yet burdened with a different kind of weight. I had poisoned a man. I had run away in the night. I had abandoned my home, my clothes, my books, my garden. I was a fugitive in my own life. I walked to the small bathroom and turned on the tap. I splashed cold water on my face, scrubbing at my skin as if I could wash away the feeling of Matthew's touch. I looked in the cracked mirror. The woman staring back was pale, with dark circles under her eyes, but her gaze was steady. Inner monologue. You did what you had to do. Audrey, he was going to erase you. He was going to consume you until there was nothing left but a shell he could fill with his own desires. You are not a criminal. You are a survivor. I lay down on the bed, fully clothed. I pulled the scratchy blanket up to my chin. I expected to cry. I waited for the tears to come, for the grief over the lost engagement, the lost hope of a new family, but my eyes remained dry. Instead, I felt a strange emptiness. It was the feeling of a storm that had passed, leaving behind a landscape that was battered but still standing. I thought about the house. I thought about Matthew waking up on the kitchen floor. Grasping the ring, I had returned to him. I wondered if he was angry. I wondered if he was scared. For the first time in 6 months, I did not care how he felt. I closed my eyes. Images flashed behind my eyelids. The shattered picture frame, the garage floor covered in trash, Letitia's handkerchief on the coffee shop table. Each memory was a sharp shard of glass, but they no longer cut me. They were just pieces of a puzzle I had finally solved. I slept fitfully, waking up at every creak of the floorboards, every car door slamming in the parking lot. But when morning came, gray and drizzly, I was still there. I was safe. I packed my few belongings. I checked out of the motel, paying with cash I had withdrawn from an ATM miles back. I got back on the road. I was heading to Ohio, to my parents' house. It was a place I had not visited enough since David died. A place I had avoided because I did not want them to see my pain. Now, I was going back not to hide, but to heal. The road stretched out ahead, gray and endless. I turned on the radio. A classic rock song was playing, something David used to hum while he cooked. I reached out and turned the volume up. I tapped my fingers on the steering wheel, the fingers of my left hand, adorned only by a simple band of platinum. The fear was still there, lurking in the corners of my mind, the uncertainty of what came next, the legal battles, the inevitable confrontation, the process of untangling my finances from his, loomed like storm clouds on the horizon. But for now, in this car, moving at 65 miles per hour away from the wreckage, I felt something I had not felt since the day David died. I felt like I owned my own soul again. 3 months have passed since the night I drove away from Connecticut. The autumn leaves in Ohio are turning a brilliant, burning red, a stark contrast to the gray numbness that used to consume me. I am living in a small guest cottage on my parents' property, just outside of Columbus. It is not grand. There are no marble countertops, no velvet drapes, and certainly no ghosts trapped in the walls. It is simple, and for the first time in years, simple is enough. The fallout was messy, as explosions usually are. Matthew did not let me go quietly. 2 days after I left, he filed a police report claiming I had stolen his car, which was technically registered in my name, and embezzled funds from our joint account. He tried to paint a picture of a mentally unstable woman who had snapped and robbed him. He threatened lawsuits. He threatened to drag David's name through the mud in the press. For a week, I was terrified. I sat in my parents' living room, shaking, waiting for the subpoena, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But the shoe never dropped. Because of Letitia, I never saw the confrontation between them. But my lawyer told me about the affidavit she submitted. Leticia Sterling, a woman of God and iron, walked into a lawyer's office and gave a sworn statement detailing her son's plan to desecrate my late husband's wedding ring. She detailed his history of financial manipulation. She corroborated my claims of emotional abuse. She chose truth over blood, with his own mother as the star witness for the defense. Matthew's case crumbled before it even reached a courtroom. The last I heard, he had moved to Chicago, fleeing the whispering and the judgment of the community he had tried so hard to impress. He is alone now, a king without a kingdom, stripped of the mask he wore so tightly. I walked through the iron gates of the cemetery. It was a crisp afternoon. The air smelled of damp earth and decaying leaves. I held a bouquet of white lilies, David's favorite. I found his headstone easily. It was clean, the granite shining under the weak afternoon sun. I knelt in the grass, not caring about the dampness seeping into my jeans. "Hey you," I whispered. I placed the flowers against the cold stone. I traced the letters of his name with my finger. "I almost lost you," I said, my voice catching in my throat. "I almost let him erase you." I looked down at my hand. David's platinum band caught the light. It looked battered. There were tiny scratches on the surface, marks of a life lived, of a journey through trash bags and pockets and despair. But it was there. "I am not looking for someone to replace you anymore," I said to the silence, and I meant it. For so long, I thought the void in my chest needed to be filled by another person. I thought being alone meant I was incomplete. Matthew saw that hole in me and tried to build a nest in it. He fed on my fear of solitude. But sitting there, with the wind rustling the trees, I realized something profound. The silence was not scary. It was peaceful. "I am learning to be alone, David," I continued. "I am learning that I am enough. I do not need a fiancé to validate my existence. I do not need a big house to prove I was successful. I just need to be able to look in the mirror and recognize the woman staring back." I stood up, brushing the dirt off my knees. I felt a sense of closure, not just with Matthew, but with the desperate, grieving version of myself. I was scarred. Yes, the memory of the gaslighting, the manipulation, the feeling of losing my mind. Those were wounds that would take years to fade. But scars are just proof that you survived something that tried to kill you. I touched the ring one last time. "This does not chain me to the past," I whispered, repeating the promise I made to myself. "It protects me from forgetting who I am." I turned and walked away from the grave. I did not look back. I walked toward my car, toward my small cottage, toward a life that was quiet, Small and entirely my own. I was a widow. I was a survivor. And for the first time, I was free. We are often told that love is the ultimate cure, that finding a partner is the only way to heal a broken heart. But sometimes, the pursuit of love when we are most vulnerable can lead us into the arms of predators who mistake our grief for weakness. Audrey's story is a terrifying reminder of how easily we can lose our reality when we let someone else rewrite our history. It serves as a stark warning. Never let anyone, no matter how charming, convince you that your memories are a burden or that your past is something to be ashamed of. True love honors where you have been. It does not demand you burn the map. Solitude is not a sentence. It is a sanctuary. It is better to be alone with your truth than to be in a crowded room with a lie. So, I leave you with this question to carry into the night. If someone asked you to erase the most painful yet precious part of your past to prove your love for them, would you recognize it as a new beginning? Or would you see it for what it really is? A demand for your surrender?